Greetings and salutations. Not too long ago, I decided that I would pick up the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita and peruse its contents. I got God Talks with Arjuna by Paramahansa Yogananda ji, and I began to read. Went through the contents page, all pretty normal there. Went through the introduction. Quickly, I took my time. I decided to read it carefully. However, yes, introductions, I have no doubt, are of great import. However, whenever I see introduction, I do kind of feel not so much that I want to skip over them. It's more that in this case, I've sat down to read the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita and I'm ready to go. Chapter 1, verse 1, give it to me. And then I sit down ready, mentally prepared. My mind and body are ready to absorb the knowledge. And then I open the page and I get introduction. And I'm like, oh, gee, I have to go for introduction before I get to chapter 1, verse 1, which is what I really want to read. However, on this occasion, I did feel that it is important to read every word carefully and attentively. So I did just that. Introduction complete. I got to chapter 1, verse 1, and I said to my mind, prepare yourself to be obliterated with wisdom and knowledge. And that is exactly what happened. I started reading just verse 1, and I'm still on verse 1 after many, many months, because the commentary simply on verse 1 is mind-boggling. Let me shed a little bit more light on why. I read chapter 1, verse 1, and my perception of verse 1 and the first few verses up until this point had largely been that it's just setting the stage. It is just a little introduction to the Bhagavad Gita and a bit of background, and then once you get into the later verses, chapter 2, that's when Lord Krishna starts dropping some real knowledge. That wasn't the case. I ended up reading the commentary on verse 1, and it was quite a long commentary just on verse 1, and every single page had some practical diamond of knowledge or wisdom or something that I could take away, reflect upon, ponder upon, and inculcate, bring into my own life, and it would have a gargantuan impact on my life in terms of self-discipline, how I interact with the world, peace, happiness, my health. And so truly, as I was reading, I said, you know what, Random? Why do I want to move on from verse 1 before I've actually mastered what is actually teaching and saying and what I'm actually reading? Why move forward until I've actually mastered all of this in verse 1? Because just simply reading this verse, I felt if I can understand and implement all of this into my life, I'd be moving forward absolute leagues upon leagues, leaps and bounds that were miles and miles long, it felt like. Anyway, I'm still on verse 1. It is easier said than done to master simply verse 1. So yes, as much as I felt like there was so much more, over hundreds and hundreds more verses to go through, no doubt with extraordinary wisdom in there that I could be delving into, it still felt right to stick with verse 1 rather than moving forward before I'd actually really internalized what I was reading and practicalized it in my life. As right as this method feels, it does leave a little niggle in the back of my mind that there are these hundreds of verses still to be pondered upon and may have inspiration and motivation that connects a bunch of dots that will assist me in mastering more and more of what the Gita teaches. That little niggle has been in my mind ever since I embarked on chapter 1, verse 1. And so, when recently an opportunity presented itself for me to learn a verse from further on in the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita presented itself to me, I decided to take it. And thus, here we are. Indeed, yes, I have had cause to learn a verse of the Gita each week, which is good news, and I welcome with open arms. Because firstly, it gives me an opportunity to read, contemplate, and plumb the depths of another verse of the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita and see what motivations, inspiration, wisdom, and guidance I find in further verses that I read. And these videos, the idea behind it that came to my mind was that they almost act as a type of note-taking for me, a contemplation diary. Feels like a good way to gather my thoughts and even focus my thoughts into slightly more coherent verbal format. Secondly, a long time ago, not that long ago, but some time ago, I was watching a tutorial video on a particularly complex board game that was a little daunting to set up and play. And I was watching a video that someone had created, and they explained that there are plenty of tutorial videos for this board game out there, but what they felt that they could add to the pool of videos available was that they were going through it at a slower pace. They were going to read the rules during the video so that the viewer could see what the rules were, listen to them, and then see how that translated into the setup and the actual gameplay. And they did so at a very steady pace. And I remember as I was watching the video, that was exactly what I needed, because it was such a complex game. I thought, all these other videos look incredible, they are very informative, but they're so quick that it's hard to keep up. And so while I was watching this person's video, I was very appreciative and grateful that they took the time to do a slower video, explain in greater depth, and that they decided to post said video. Which got me considering what my videos would add to the already large pool of videos that discuss the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita to varying depths. And the first thought that popped into my mind, and the one that did end up feeling the most accurate and right, was that there are plenty of videos about the Gita and people discussing various chapters and verses, and often I feel that they are from people that have really studied the Gita from front to back, people that have a scholarly background, a keen interest and understanding of various philosophies and other Vedic texts, and they are always, most of the time, very enlightening, very inspirational, and sometimes a little bit over my head. I'm like, oh, this is a lot of knowledge that is going into my brain, and my brain is having difficulty comprehending and processing said information because it's just so much. It's often feeling like, okay, I hear what you're saying, I get it, and it sounds right, it feels right, and I want to pursue it, but how do I get from here to there? Because when they're speaking, because they've got such a deep understanding of the whole of the Gita, of the whole of the Vedas, or whole loads of philosophies and ideologies that they're bringing together into their discourse or their commentary or their discussion, I just don't get it. Or more accurately, not that I don't get it, it's just very intense. And often it feels like trying to grasp hold of just one thread, just even one bit of information that they were trying to tell is so difficult because it just keeps slipping out of my mind. I'm like, oh, what was that they were just saying? Oh yeah, that sounds really cool. I'm going to keep that in my mind and try and do that. But oh no, there's this new thing that they're talking about and that sounds really good. And then it just ends up at the end of it grasping for all or even one thread, and you end up with like nothing in your hand because all the threads of wisdom have slipped away from the grasp because of the sheer intensity, the sheer volume, the depth of information that was flying about. You're trying to grasp hold of something, anything, and keep hold of it. And in the end, you don't end up with all that much. Maybe not nothing, maybe not no threads, but not as many threads as were flying about. Which, to be fair, I guess the good point about videos is that you can always rewatch them and keep gathering more threads. Anyway, I ramble. The thought that popped into my head as to what my videos could contribute to the pool that is already out there is that it is a video, a contemplation, a rambling, pondering of a random dude who picks up the Bhagavad Gita, picks a verse, reads it, contemplates it, and rambles on about it. And thus, being a random dude, not a scholar, not having a particular rich background in any philosophy or other Vedic or spiritual texts of any sort, perhaps, maybe, possibly, my ramblings could present as something that is a little bit more relatable to other randoms out there that decide to pick up and read the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita. And we can contemplate and ponder what we read together, virtually, possibly never interacting. Going through each verse at a slower pace, going through it verse by verse without having almost the full context of the Bhagavad Gita, just reading a verse and thinking about what does that verse mean. And I very much like that idea of revealing and unraveling each verse week by week, and doing so from the perspective of a random militant bystander. Because rather than giving that perspective of someone that studied the Bhagavad Gita from start to finish and really picked apart each verse, which I don't feel like most people have done, to take it one verse at a time, reveal each verse each week, and just share and ponder what I understood and took away from each verse as I read it, and that I feel shall be my contribution to the pool. Alright, before we get cracking, there is 2 disclaimers. Disclaimer number 1 is that I am not a sage. I am not a scholar. I am not a philosophical mastermind. This is not a official discourse or commentary or fully fleshed out contemplation, a fully rounded pondering of the whole of the Bhagavad Gita that I am doing once I've studied it to completion. Nor do I claim that I have understood any of the Gita, that I have practicalized anything. It is, as the channel's name suggests, my random ramblings on the verses that I read of the Shrimad Bhagavad Gita, and should be taken as such. Disclaimer number 2. You might be thinking, okay, Random, stop rambling. This video has gone on long enough. You said that you dislike introduction, but this is a long introduction. So get to it. Get to chapter 1, verse 1. Let's go. Well, I'm not starting from chapter 1, verse 1. The weekly reading that I've had the opportunity to partake of means that I've had cause to start from chapter 9. Alright, Random, wrap it up. Chapter 9, verse 1, let's go. Nope. The weekly reading has given me cause to start from chapter 9, verse 25. So that is where we shall be starting from. And so this is where the disclaimer comes in, before I get too derailed, is that we are starting halfway through chapter 9. Well, not halfway exactly, but we're not doing this in chronological order, which, believe me, I had a long battle within my own mind whether to go back and start from chapter 1, verse 1, or just go from chapter 9, verse 25, where I started the weekly reading at, and I decided to go with the latter as it fell more naturally into the pattern of what the opportunity presented, and also felt it would be easier to be more consistent as I would be reading that verse each week anyway. However, not starting at chapter 1, verse 1 and going through each verse in numerical order. I think I said chronological order earlier. I don't know if that makes sense. Numerical order, chapter order, verse order does present a I don't want to say problem, a curveball, let's call it. That being in chapter 9 and not having gone through chapter 1 through to 8, I imagine there's going to be a lot of contextual gaps and possible conundrums or confusion, hopefully temporary. But I'm sure once I make it full circle, things shall start falling into place. But it is something to be aware of and keep in mind that starting where I'm starting, there's certain dots that might be missing to make certain connections, and I'm quite content in knowing that and actually looking forward to that point when I do eventually circle around to chapter 1s through to 8, because I like that. In fact, I love that feeling when you're like, maybe I feel like I read a verse and I'm like, I don't understand this, it makes no sense, but let's just put that on hold for a second, and then eventually when I get around to chapter 7 in the future, then there'll be a moment where, oh yes, okay, now everything that I read in chapter 9, or that particular verse that I didn't get in chapter 11, now makes sense. And that moment of connecting that dot to this dot, and then this dot to that dot, and everything starting to fall into place, that realizations that come through, and understanding that comes when the puzzle pieces fall into place, is very satisfying. Anyway, that was disclaimer 2. And with that done and dusted, Shrimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, verse 25. Let's get it!